Okay, chapter 5, perception and individual decision making. So when we talk about perception, we talk about how our brains interprets and organize the information that we receive from the environment through our sensory organs, through our senses. So basically, perception is a process by which, like I mentioned, individual organize and interprets their sensory impression that give meaning to the environment. So perception is very important to in the study of organizational behavior, because people behavior most of the time are based on the perceptions, not the reality, not the what the reality is. So when we talk about perception, we talk about the way we perceive, how we perceive and interpret. Maybe the information that we receive from the sensory organ are correct, but the way we interpret the information and the way we organize or how we organize are actually wrong. So that's why it leads to distorted information. So the way we perceive may be incorrect, so it's actually lead to problem later on. So the factor that influence the perception consists of three: from the perceiver, from the person itself, from the situation in the environment, from the targets, the person that we are focusing on. So three things that influence our perception: perceiver, us; situation, the surrounding; and the target, the impulse or the sensory stimuli outside. So there are theories regarding the perceptions. One is attribution theory. This theory suggests that when we observe an individual behavior, we tend to determine whether the behavior that we watch is actually internally caused or externally caused. So in order to determine whether it is external or externally caused, we depend on the three factors: distinctiveness, consensusness, and consistency. So when the individual, let's say we want to know about the behavior of others, whether the behavior of others are caused by their behavior or external factor, we tend to see whether the individual display different behavior at different times, at different situation. So if they display different behavior at different situation, that means their distinctiveness is high. If they show difference, if they show similar, their behavior in one situation is similar, second situation is similar, and third situation is similar, or majority of the time they show the similar kind of pattern of behavior, that means their distinctiveness is low. If they show at different time distinctive kind of behavior or characteristic, then they have high distinctiveness. In terms of consensusness, if they face with similar situation, whether they respond in the same way or in the different way. If they respond when they face with a similar situation, if they respond in the same way, that means they have high consensusness. If they respond differently at different occasion, that means they have low consensusness. Consensusness means whether they are similar. In term consensus, agreements from one situation to another situation. Consistency, whether there are consistency in the person action, whether in this situation this person will act like this, in the second situation this person will act like that. So if that's the person will act on different situation and occasion similarly, that means they have high consistency. If the person actions are different from one situation to another, that means they have low consistency. So in order to know whether the behavior of the person is caused internally or externally, we look at these three factors: distinctiveness, consensusness, and consistency. So here is basically, if distinctiveness is low, consensusness is low, consistency is high, we can conclude that the person, the behavior of the person is caused internally. Personally, they cause it, not because of the external factor, but because of their behavior personally. So we can say that based looking at these three factors. So I give you an example here. For example, there's a one theory called fundamental attribution theory. So this fundamental attribution theory tend to underestimate the influence of external factor and overestimate the influence of internal or personal. So let's say you see this bus. This bus driver always keep looking at his mobile phone, and suddenly you saw that the bus happened to be in accident. So if you see this bus driver always watching or looking at his mobile phone all the time, and suddenly this bus happened in the accident, you tend to say that the accident happened because of the bus driver is careless, isn't it? So if you tend to say that the bus driver is careless, you tend to say that the reason for the accident is because of the internal factor, because of the bus driver personally, his characteristic that causing the accident. So here is called under the fundamental attribution error, where you underestimate the external factor, you overestimate the internal factor. That means you exaggerate the cause of the bus is because of the bus driver, because he's looking at the mobile phone all the time while driving. You maybe underestimate the cause of external factor. Maybe even though he's looking at the mobile phone all the time, maybe because of the road is bumpy, or maybe because of the roads has a hole here and there, so that's actually caused the bus to happen in the accident. So in this case, if you tend to say that this accident happened because of the bus driver is careless, or do not really maybe driving the bus in the very dangerous, risky way. So you tend to underestimate the external factor, overestimate the internal factor. So fundamental attribution error is the tendency to underestimate the external and overestimate the internal. That means you are focusing more on internal instead of external. So another one is self-serving bias. It's basically the same as this one, fundamental attribution error. Here, self-serving bias, you tend to attribute the success to internal factor because of yourself. So if let's say you got A for this course, you tend to say, oh, I got A because I study hard, so I deserve it. So you tend to attribute your success because of yourself, your study, not because of maybe the question is easy, maybe because of the lecturer is so good in teaching or in giving notes and so on. So that's external. So self-serving bias, you tend to attribute the success, the good things, because of you, or internal, because of your personal. And if you fail, you tend to blame external factor or others. For example, maybe because of the questions so difficult, lecturers not so good, conditions and so on. So you tend to blame, if you fail, the factors. If you pass, you tend to attribute to yourself. So here, self-serving bias, individual attribute their own success to their personal or internal factor. That's self-serving bias. Another thing is selective perception. Normally, selective perception, it is helping us in perceive something. Because if you look at this photo, all the pencil, maybe it's kind of very difficult to see which one is good. So if you have one color that is red is more stand out, you tend to pick that one, isn't it? Because that's a selective perception. So you tend to pick the one that is stand out, so that's easy for you, because that one is easy because it stand out, maybe because of the colors and so on. So this, normally we use the shortcut in terms of choosing something, so we consider this as selective perception. Halo effects is another theory that we normally draw based among others. We tend to draw our general impression based on the single characteristics that is positive. There's another one, is called horn effects. Horn is like a, it's like a horn, like a it gives us some pain if we say horn. So halo effect is something good. So we tend to draw a general good impressions about one single characteristic that is positive. Horn effect, we tend to draw general impression about something based on the single negative characteristic. So halo effects, for example, uh, when we meet someone, we look at the first characteristic impression. Is it good or is it bad? If someone is beautiful, we tend to remember that person because of the pretty face. That's a single characteristic. Or maybe because the way she dress up, maybe because her hair, or but her face, or and so on. But we look at a single characteristics that is positive. Contrast effects, because sometimes when we have so many things that are good or so many things that are bad, we tend to contrast one thing with another. Especially this theory has been used in many retail or marketing strategy in order to sell the product. So contrast effect, we tend to compare one with another. Let's say you have two items. Maybe the first item is good, but second item normally better or worse. So when we talk about contrast effect, we talk about the way we compare one with another. For example, in order to buy boots or anything, normally we compare with previous products or with previous thing that we bought. Or when we have a partner, for example friends, we tend to find someone that is better than the previous one. So we tend to compare. If we have this kind of friend, we tend to compare with the previous friend or with the other friends, whether it is good, whether it is bad, our friends or our products, for example. So contrast effect, we tend to compare. Normally the next one is better than the previous one. So it's influenced by our comparisons. So it's like these photos, you tend to compare with the previous one, whether this one is sexy, this one is beautiful, and so on. So we tend to have this kind of perception all the time. And another theory that normally we use, we tend to stereotypes. So stereotyping is judging someone based on one perceptions of the group that person belong to. For example, if I belong to Malay race, and then someone will look at me and then associate me with one thing that is belong to Malay, for example. So if someone stereotype based on me because I belong to Malay, so I must have this kind of characteristic. So that's one is considered stereotypes. Another is in terms of gender. So how many of us consider girls should be in this kind of course or in this kind of sport? Men should be playing football. Girls should be playing netball, for example. So that's also considered stereotypes because normally we tend to stereotypes men playing football, a girl playing maybe netball. So that's considered stereotype. If we think that maybe there's some girl who want to play football and you say it's not suitable for girls because it's not suit for their for example for their characteristics. So that can be a stereotype because you tend to associate one characteristic with the rest of the group that this person belong to. So when we talk about all these things is considered as an application of shortcut in the organization. Also, they apply this, especially we can apply ourselves when we go to interview because the interviewer also apply this kind of theories when they interview their candidates. So when you go for interview, for example, it is important to remember that first impression is a last impression. That means the first 5 minutes of your interviewing, for example, you come to the rooms, the way you carry yourself is actually give impression to the interviewer. So that's first 5 minutes is important in order to build up your impression so that it will favorable on the eyes of interviewers. So according to the study indicate that the most interviewers' decisions change very little after 5 minutes. So the first 5 minutes is very important. So you need to hold these halo effects or these good impressions so that you be able to get the job, for example. Okay.